Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the defendant, the jury, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
With regard to this issue of the defendant's truthfulness, one of the things that you learned as part of your investigation was that the defendant said that after the murder, she had cuts on her hands because she had cut them on apples, right?
Yes.
And did you also hear, for example, other stories other than that she had cut them on her hands on apples while she was cutting apples? Did you hear anything else about that?
About the cuts?
About the cuts on her hands, how they came about.
I don't recall hearing any other story other than the cuts on the hands for the apple.
And so that's one of the things that you believed when you were talking to the defendant, that the cuts that she suffered during this killing were as a result of her cutting apples, right?
I didn't believe that.
So as you're going along, you're making an assessment as to what you believe and what you don't believe, right?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was unclear. You're saying that I believe that she got the cuts from the apple. No,
I'm saying that isn't it true that your notes reflect the fact that your information is that the cuts the defendant had after this killing resulted when she was slicing apples, right?
Right.
And you believe that, right?
I don't recall that I focused on that as much as what I was retained to do, which was look at whether or not there was domestic violence in the context of the relationship, which was really what I was what I came on to do.
I'm not asking you whether or not you focused on that. You understand that?
I understand what you're saying.
I'm asking you whether or not you believe the defendant when she told you, or the information that you received during this investigation, whether or not you believe that the cuts to her hands were caused while she was cutting apples, green apples.
Objection, Judge Foundation, as to where this happened.
Well, ma'am, let me show you your notes about this particular incident, okay?
I may need my glasses.
Did she get her glasses?
Yes, and it says in the glasses.
Ma'am, take a look at Exhibit 605, and take a look at the highlighted portion. And once you've read the highlighted portion, let me know.
You're on the witness reading page, so she has context of it.
Yes.
Did you read the entire page?
Yes.
May I have it back, please?
Sure.
This is your handwriting, right?
Yes, it is.
And this deals with this issue about the cuts on the hands that the defendant received at the time of Travis's death, right?
Correct.
And in it, your notes reflect that Jodi said cuts on her hands were from cutting apples, right?
Correct.
So with regard to that issue about cutting apples, did you verify whether or not that may or may not have been true?
No, I did not.
You could have gone to collateral sources like you said, right?
I could have.
You could have gone, for example, to the police report, right?
I could have.
You didn't do that, right?
I did read the police report.
And do you know whether or not there were any statements in that police report of what the defendant said caused the cuts on her hand?
No, I don't.
But you did read the police report, right?
I read the police report very long ago and didn't reread it.
So the answer is you did read the police report, right?
I did read the police report.
And do you know whether or not, from your memory, whether or not there was any indication what she said caused the cuts on her hand?
No, I don't.
One of the things that you told us was that you reviewed, well, let's put it this way, did you review her statements to the police?
I did. I reviewed them a long time ago. And
I'm not asking you, am I asking you when you reviewed them, ma'am? I am
You're
not.
asking me if I reviewed them, and I'm putting that in the context that I reviewed them a very long time ago.
I'm not asking you for a context. Do we understand each other?
I understand you don't want context.
Ma'am, Judge, I would ask that she be admonished for the last comment as to what the prosecutor wrote.
All right, move on, next question.
Ma'am, with regard to this particular case, you did review her statements to the police, right?
I did.
You reviewed the videotapes, right?
To the police?
Yes.
No, I did not.
So you just reviewed a transcript of it, right?
Correct.
And in that transcript, isn't it true that there's a different version of how she cut that finger?
I guess there is, because you're telling me and I don't remember.
No, I don't want you to, so...
I don't remember. I don't recall, Mr. Martinez, honestly.
All
I
right,
don't recall.
let's assume that there were 4 different versions of how that finger was cut. Assume that there are 4 different versions of how she cut her fingers. Wouldn't that cause any problems for you in evaluating this case, because there clearly is an inconsistency there?
Mr. Martinez, people
Yes or
lie.
no?
No, that would not be a complete answer.
All right? No, it would not cause a problem for you, or yes, it would cause a problem for you?
I cannot answer that yes or no and be honest about how I answer it.
With regard to this case also, you were aware of this issue involving gas cans that the defendant supposedly asked her boyfriend about before she took this trip. You're familiar with that, right?
Darryl Brewer.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
You're familiar with that. And you're familiar with that, the fact that before she went on this trip, she asked Mr. Brewer for the use of 2 gas cans to take on the trip, right?
I am.
And in fact, that caused you problems, didn't it?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, that caused you problems in terms of the defendant's truthfulness, didn't it? You look over there. No, I'm asking a question.
No,
that caused you
I'm
problems, didn't it?
I don't believe it did.
Well, let's take a look at your notes.
All right.
Let me show you an exhibit first.
Okay.
To give you a little context, take a look at exhibit 607. Read the whole thing and then let me know when you're done.
All right.
Have you
Right.
read it?
Yes, uh-huh.
That's your handwriting on this particular case, right?
Right.
And it does reference this issue involving the borrowing of 2 gas cans from Darrell Brewer, right?
Right, but
Yes or no, does it?
yes, it does.
And doesn't it indicate that on the last week of May of 2008, Jodi told Darrell she needed to borrow 2 gas cans because she was taking a long trip to Mesa? Doesn't it say that?
In part, it says that.
It does say that, though, doesn't it?
In part, it says that.
Well, let's read the whole part. Last week of May of 2008, Jodi told Darrell she needed to borrow 2 gas cans because she was taking a long trip to Mesa and didn't want to run out of gas, right? That's what it says.
That's in part what it says. That's not what the rest of it
I'm
says.
talking about the issue involving the gas cans. That's all it says about the gas cans, doesn't it?
Well, it talks about the trip.
Take a look at it.
I looked at it. I took notes on what people said. I took the notes right off what people said. I don't necessarily have a problem with what I said. I took notes to ask questions.
And isn't that how you do your did the evaluation in this case? You take what somebody said, and then you look at everything else, and then you come in and tell us that this is domestic violence, right?
This doesn't have anything to do in particular with the domestic violence I was assessing, Mr. Martinez.
You used the same procedure with regard to this particular issue that you used with regard to any other issue in this case, right?
I'm not certain that that would be true, but I'm not certain what you're referring to. What I did with this case, if you want to know what I did with this
No,
case.
I don't want to know what you did with this
Okay.
case. I want you to answer my question. And my question to you is, isn't it true that you've been telling us that in this case, you've looked at writings and you reviewed those and took those into account, right?
Correct.
Isn't that same thing that you did with regard to the gas can? You read it, you took it into account, and you made notes on it, right?
I did.
And with regard to that particular issue, that caused you some problems, didn't it?
No, the gas cans didn't cause me problems.
Isn't it true that you had an issue with that because you believe that perhaps the defendant may not be truthful? Isn't that a problem for you?
I think my question was, what does this mean on the side of the page? And I was asking about what that meant. I wanted to get a description of what erratic behavior meant.
Actually, isn't it true, ma'am, that what you thought back then is why did the defendant want to borrow 2 gas cans from Darrell? Did she know she was going to...
Then he's reading from something that's not been marked or in evidence.
Isn't it true that you were concerned that she had told you about the trip, and now you have this issue about her going to Mesa, and then you said, I thought this was a last-minute decision. Didn't that create a problem for you?
I didn't hear the question.
Isn't it true that you had questions about it because you thought it was a last-minute decision to go to Mesa?
I still think it was a last-minute decision.
And that caused you problems in the context of exhibit number 607, which is what she told you about Darrell and the gas cans, right?
I had a problem.
Listen, take a look at...
I had a question. You're saying a problem, I had a question.
Take a look at 608. See if you recognize the highlight, the whole page.
I did ask her that.
And did you read Exhibit 608?
Yes, I did.
That's in your handwriting, right?
Correct.
And in fact, the approach that you took here were some looking at things that you had problems with in this case,
I
right?
have questions of that.
Questions that you had in this case, right?
Yes.
And one of the questions that you had in this case involved the gas cans, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And in fact, you indicated that your words were something to the effect of you thought it was a last-minute decision and it was creating a conflict for you, right?
I wanted to make sure that it was a last-minute decision. I had questions that I wrote throughout, and I asked those questions.
And that was one of the questions that you had, was that you
Yes.
thought this was the last-minute decision, right?
Yes,
And thinking that it was a last-minute decision, in your mind, it did not make any sense that you would go to Darrell Brewer and ask for 2 gas cans to go to Mesa, because that happened many days before the trip started, right?
Objection is mischaracterizing what Ms. Arias actually said. She never said that. The summary of the notes are not what Ms. Arias said.
Overruled. You may continue.
Okay?
okay.
You may answer.
Oh, I had a question about the gas cans, and one of the questions I had was because I don't know how far Utah is from Wairika. I wanted to know why she needed gas cans. That's all.
But your notes,
And I wanted to know if there was a decision to go to Mesa, which I had written, and later in that same page, it talks about the trip to Southern California and Utah. So I wasn't clear about whether Mesa was an intended trip or not, and I wanted to find out whether it was.
are you saying, ma'am, that you did not write